Well, this one might get us a little bit of hate. Welcome back to the Self-Made Podcast, and today I welcome Robb back on the show to initially get our views on the Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson interviews with Piers Morgan. We talk about the impact Jordan Peterson has had on Robb's life, from listening to him on the Joe Rogan episode all the way back in 2016 until now. We speak about how Piers Morgan conducted his interviews and how we felt it was actually like two different interviewers in both senses. We talk about whether the points brought up in these interviews were valid and how each of them individually came across. We speak about disagreeableness and agreeableness, what is too much, and should this be a trait that is taught more, before moving on to the concept of, has feminism gone too far? When feminism started, it was a message for good, pushing equality. But now, is there a level of overcorrection, where now some people are demonizing men? We break down looking at this, from the Me Too movement to the take on Hollywood and cinema, to a few things again that we've seen in current day interviews. If you enjoy this episode, please share on your favourite social media platforms or give us a review on iTunes and Spotify. If you disagree with us, let us know. We'd love to have a good debate. Drop us a comment. As long as it's respectful, we'll get back to you, and I'd love to meet new people based off the discussions we had. And I will leave you with myself and Robb McGeary. So Robb, we bounce between a lot of topics on these shows, from training to aliens to everything else. And I do think the topical thing at the moment, if there's any show where we talk topical stuff, because we talk the Queen, is the two powerhouse interviews by Piers Morgan recently, because they have literally swept the media. Before we talk about your thoughts on the interviews, you put a post up recently of Jordan Peterson and talking about the impact he has had on you and your life. For people that haven't seen that, just to preface your thoughts going in and your biases going in, what impact has Jordan Peterson had on you as a person?
That's a good question. So I don't know about many people, but I first came across Jordan Peterson on his first Joe Rogan appearance back in 2017. And the reason for that was, it may have been earlier than that. He was trending a lot on Twitter then because of his message on, I forget the name of the exact law they were trying to pass, but about this thing they were trying to put into Canadian law about hate speech laws and gendered language, things like that. And he was blowing up on Twitter because of that. And his first appearance on Rogan was because of that and the attention he was getting at universities. And this is when that first woke crowd started taking over universities and protesting and setting fire to places, things like that. Let's not forget that. And I really opened up to him appearing on that episode. And it was cool. The first half, they were talking about what I thought he was all about. He was just a professor at a university that disagreed with these laws coming into play. But then the second half of the episode was, well, this is where you find out what he actually does. He's got this book, Maps of Meaning, where he talks about a lot of stuff, but messages from the Bible. He's got this authoring program, which I jumped on straight away. I was like, I like this guy's message. And it really kind of fit into where I was at the time with the manosphere, masculinity, self-ownership, personal development. And it just so happened that obviously I'm listening to him going, I really, really agree with this message. So I try not to hold any guru up here. I try not to take one person and just believe every single thing they say. But there's so many different people, you can just hear the same message in a different way, and it will stick with you a hell of a lot more. There's so many people in the manosphere, so to call it, that are just that are unhinged, terrible. I mean, Jordan Peterson himself is a little bit unhinged, but there's something about the guy that really had enough tough love in there, as well as enough empathy for it to really, really stick with me. Whereas some people are too much empathy, and some people are too much tough love, and it doesn't stick with you at the right time. Depending who you are, maybe you're the person that needs more tough love. I don't know. So went on a long, long route of listening to most of Jordan Peterson's podcast, watching most of his lectures, every single Joe Rogan appearance he went on. And obviously he got bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's absolutely huge now, as he rightfully should be. I think he's one of the figures that young men, especially, as well as older men, certainly need. And it was a post, the reason I shared him the other day was a post to do with building the life you want to live, because you don't want to get to 40, sit down and go, oh, Jesus, what have I done? And realise that, man, you're running out of time, when that's exactly where I'm at. So that message hit at exactly the right time, which is why I shared it. And I like figures that get a lot of hate as well. Because when there's a lot of noise about them, that's when I go, right, let's dig in. Let's see why they're so polarising. And it turns out the reasons he's polarising, I agree with everything he says anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I agree with that come out of Jordan Peterson. Now, you were talking about when you started finding him out, and I couldn't quite remember when I first came across him, but I think it was I actually saw the clips first. It was like little clips on YouTube of Jordan Peterson ending arguments, like shutting down people. I'm like, who is this?
Yeah.
But I think for someone like me who's maybe been a little bit too agreeable at times, and we will touch on that terminology later, but and not being able to stick up for himself and didn't know how do you do it without being a dick. Jordan Peterson, I think, is a once in a lifetime human being and debater. The fact that he can literally stay humble, generally stay not emotionless because we're far from that, but just he doesn't, as you said, that balance between like empathy and assertiveness is something that I think is so rare and makes him so captivating. Like I never have an argument and go, he doesn't have a point. Even though I didn't agree with it, I think he's often right, and I think he conducts himself better than the argument I agreed with. He's the person that would probably change my mind on things more than anyone else if I didn't agree with what he said, which I normally do.
I think so. That big thing there is the amount of empathy. There's too many. I mean, you look at, let's say, Jocko Willink, for example. There's not a lot of empathy behind that, but there's a lot of self-ownership, a lot of action taking. Cool, it's what young men need to hear. But we do need that other side as well. But he's certainly not too soft. I can't think of anyone at the moment I would say is too soft on that front because I don't listen to loads of people anyway. So I can't think of any names, but they're definitely out there. But man, I think everyone's got their moment that they came across him, whether it was the Kathy Newman interview, whether it was early Rogan, whether it was much later down the line after the documentary, after he's been viral on news pages for whatever reason, or even just recently where he's been cancelled off of Twitter and was he taken off Instagram as well? I don't know. He was taken off at least one platform. But I think there's enough noise about him that makes you look into what he's saying, and there's enough of a message there to make it stick from most people. I don't know many that say they would disagree with everything that he says, really, unless they're just being argumentative and disagreeable, which he's got a lecture on how you overcome that. So,
yeah. So when you look at the two interviews, what was your thoughts on the two interviews with Peterson and Tate? Both polarizing figures, but I very much felt like how Pierce conducts interviews, it felt like a totally different interview, a totally different environment on both. What was your take on the two interviews?
So you're 100%, I would 100% agree. It is like watching two different people do an interview. One where he's coming across Pierce obviously, one where he's coming across very argumentative, very, very interrupty, which, that's part of his style. He knows when to do that and when to switch it off, obviously. So we've seen that. One where he's almost trying to push, let's say the Tate one, he's trying to push Tate to a reaction, it seems like, which is why he's interrupting him, which is why he's bringing up things that weren't particularly relevant. And then the other side was interviewing Peterson, where he's very laid back, he's listening a hell of a lot. It's a bit where Peterson gets emotional and doesn't jump on him, takes his time, lets him have his reaction. In terms of, I think he's a bit of a mong, but in terms of an interviewer, in terms of his journalism skills, that's why he's so big, because he can do what he does. There's not many people who can. There's really not many people who can do it like him. So he's as big as he is for a reason.
Yeah, I think he sometimes makes himself look worse in order to get. He knows the game. He knows how to get clips that will go viral. And sometimes that means that he has to actually be a worse interviewer to get the process. He has to poke the bear. Like in the Peterson interview, they talk about the Kathy Newman interview, right? And how listening was so important. And I thought it was interesting to see that Piers Morgan was saying that the issue he thought that Kathy Newman faced was that she had a preconceived idea of what Jordan Peterson was going to be. And then he went into the Andrew Tate interview with a very preconceived idea what Andrew Tate was going to be.
Very much so. And you can see it was like there was a certain point that he was trying to get out of him. Like you say, like he had an agenda there. But I don't know what point he was looking for. Whether he was looking for an apology or he was looking for, I don't know, the other guy to turn around and say, no, it's all a fake, it's all a show. Don't know what he was looking for, what that agenda was. But with Peterson, there wasn't one. But what I found interesting, I've just listened to Peterson's own podcast, which had Piers' guest on it, and he touches on that. And he said it needed two different interview styles. The one he used with Tate is the type that he would use if he was interviewing any politician, anyone who's given a politician's answer. And he says that several times to Tate. That's what a politician would say. You're dodging the question. But then as soon as they start to speak, he jumps in and interrupts them again and again and again. And I don't think it ever really gets anywhere. That's why I can't watch those types of interviews. I really, really can't. What I thought was quite funny is you can see moments where Tate's looks like he's almost about to burst, but then he laughs. He's quite calm. He's very, very well spoken, very well mannered guy, really, that most people would disagree with that. But then when he jumps on Peterson's interview, he says his sons had already spoke to him about it. Big fans of it. His son's big fans of Peterson's YouTube channel. And they had already said, like, don't do your usual, jump in, listen to the guy, let's hear what he has to say, you'll love it. And I thought that was really cool that he actually listened to his sons and did that. Because someone like, especially at this moment in time, where I think Peterson's slightly less of a polarising figure than he certainly was, I don't think you see protests turn up at his live shows now. I could be wrong. I think he's much, much less of a overall polarising figure. So it was good to see that he didn't just do this interrupting style, trying to push into a trigger. Because I don't know what you would have got out of that. And I think if the two in a battle of words, I think Peterson would have come out on top. But
do you think that's part of the thing? Do you think that Piers Morgan knew that? Because he said early on in the interview, the things that we have in common, and it's not intellectual prowess because you're far above me in that realm, right? So I don't know if he just knew he couldn't get away with it, whereas Tate, he felt he could. That he had this opinion of Andrew Tate that he was stupid because of some of the things he said. Because he certainly tried to make him out that he was stupid. There was many times he could have go, I don't think you understand the meaning of this word. Like, he very much does understand the meaning of this word.
Very much so.
But how do you think Andrew Tate came across?
That was a weird one. But I think it's because most of the interviews that he's doing all over the place now, he's allowed to kind of just rant and what have you. Or he's got someone screaming at him at the other end of the line. Or he's interviewing with people that fully support him, fully agree with his message and are promoting him, and they're just going to sit back and let him be as controversial or as open as they want him to be. So what I thought was interesting there was seeing how he did respond when it is someone interrupting him and cutting him up and pushing him a little bit further without just screaming at him incessantly. Because you can ignore that stuff without screaming at him. But it seemed like a different, I don't know how to describe it, it seemed like a different Tate. Seemed like a different guy compared to recent video footage that we've seen. So I didn't know how to take it. What I found really weird was that he kept, I'm sure there's a reason behind it, but he kept looking away from Piers and looking at the camera and talking and giving his answers. I thought that was really funny, but it was, I noticed it enough.
I loved it when Piers called it, I know where Piers called him on it. I'm over here.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird. But I know there'll be people...
I think, do you think he went into that interview, and this may be why he was different, do you think he went into this interview with the agenda of getting back on platforms?
I think it was an odd choice.
More than it was...
I think it was an odd choice of interview. I don't know what the incentive there was, because it's never... I don't know if you ever watched his... Not his apology video, but once he had got banned, he did this long... 90-minute, maybe longer video explaining the reasons behind, debunking some stuff, what his things are going forward, trying to get people onto Rumble, etc. Which I've been on Rumble. It's a terrible platform. The interface is horrific. So I'll stick with YouTube for now. But the thing that really got me is that I don't see why he was on there. I get some people would go on there because it's going to increase the platform. I get some people go on there, there's a chance to get their message across. All these different reasons why. But all I could see there was him utilising the fact that the clips are going to go viral. Of course they're going to go viral. So even though he's deplatformed everywhere, he's still top video footage because everyone's still putting those things up. So I think it's clever in that respect. But other than that, I don't know what he was on there for. It's not like he's promoting a book.
Do you think he should be banned?
No. I don't think anyone should be. Especially...
What's the argument you think about when people say that they are private? Well, they're not private companies; they are public companies. But they're not charitable donations. They're not for the people. They are companies, and they can ban wherever they like. Is that a valid argument, or do you think they've outgrown the social media companies? Have outgrown that as an?
It's 100% outgrown because we know they steer the official narrative. Zuckerberg's come out saying that. I forget the name, but Twitter's old. What was his name? But whoever the CEO of Twitter was, he was on Rogan as well with an assistant, and it was terrible because they're trying to push back this argument that they don't control the social narrative, but it shows that that's not the case. 100% do. So when they ban one type of person but not another one, when you've got Andrew Tate banned but Islamic terrorist organisations still have their Twitter account, then you're like, you're not really pushing the argument that you say you are. It almost then comes across more like they're trying to steer that social narrative. So I don't think anyone really should be banned. I'd like to think if there's someone saying horrific stuff, you kind of watch what they're doing. Like there's a I don't know. Do you know who Henry Rollins is?
I know the name, but I don't know
so he's been on Rogan twice, but he's an old school punk rocker from the 80s, metal musician in the 90s, done spoken word tours, written several books, travels a lot, doing travel journeys now. He's one of my favourite people on the planet. One of the first people I grew up listening to and reading that I think helped me understand what being more of a masculine man was, even though he's not really pro-masculinity as such. But he spoke about philosophers, he writes about Nietzsche, all sorts of stuff. He said something very early on that stuck with me, way before there were these sort of social media platforms. This might have been one of his spoken words from the 90s, where he's saying how we would burn books, we would ban people from talking. And he says the reason you don't do that is because you need to learn about your enemy. You need to learn what they're saying, learn what they're thinking, so you don't get surprised, you don't get shocked. And I kind of always agree with that no matter what someone's saying, you give them a chance to say it. It doesn't mean that they're right. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It doesn't mean you have to entertain the argument. And, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequence, of course. So I've never agreed with that aspect of people shutting the argument down by deplatforming them. And as we've seen, that doesn't work. You look at Alex Jones' statistics of his website's visits. Once he got deplatformed, his website visits went through the roof. So if anything, you've increased the power of his message. It's just not as public on the public platforms. Same thing with Tate. I'm like, if you look how many, Rumble, how many Rumble subscribers he'd have now, way more than what he had on YouTube probably. His message is still appearing on every single platform, every single short, reel, everything is still him. So can you say the deplatform working? Not really. Because other people are just going to keep sharing the message.
Yeah. I totally agree with that in terms of it doesn't work. And also we've seen this through the pandemic, that the truth in a big inverted commas changes. We learn things, we evolve, and how does the narrative change? We get new information, we get data. Let's say this just to challenge and try and get us deplatformed. Ivermectin. Right? The rules have changed on ivermectin. Now it's now a publicly approved drug. Now, I don't know enough about this topic to suggest whether it should or shouldn't be, but I would argue that now it is. It shows two things. One, you could very much apologise to people like Joe Rogan that you publicly slammed for this thing, because now you're looking like a hypocrite. But two, it proves that so I'm not calling out people who slammed ivermectin. They got more information and they changed their mind. We want politicians to do this more. Of course. But what they did is they found other information. If we silence the other information, can we really find truth? A lot of the truth that I understand, what my interpretation of truth is taking the extreme from both ends, the middle ground from both ends, a different opinion, the outskirts, and forming my own opinion with some of the research, some of the studies, and some of my own subjective opinion, which if anyone says that isn't a guiding factor in their truth, they are very much lying. But I also think that a lot of this deplatforming thing is virtue signaling has gone out of control. Because you mentioned that why can terrorist organisations still love their Twitter, but Andrew Tate can't? Because it almost makes them get in good jest with the people that are complaining to ban Andrew Tate. There was a video I saw of Andrew the other day where Airbnb contacted him and says, sorry, that due to recent events, you are now no longer going to be able to use our facilities. He was like, I don't remember ever having an account. I haven't used an Airbnb in years, if ever. But they just wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Exactly.
That's what it comes down to. It's the same as waving the old rainbow flag in Pride Month. You can get,
but not in Saudi Arabia.
Of course, only certain areas of the world you can get away with that. But in terms of revenue, ad revenue dollars, it either gets more people. If you
generally believed in Pride,
go on.
Yeah, if you generally believed in Pride, you would also change the colour of the flag in Saudi Arabia, and if they didn't like it and you got shut off there, you've made a stand. Exactly. The fact you're putting it in on America, where it's generally accepted, there are a few bigots out there, but generally, homosexuality is now an accepted thing. All it's doing is currying public favour. it's not actually making a statement anymore in the West. And if it was, you have to do it elsewhere too.
It makes one of two things happens. Either your ad revenue increases or your income increases because of you agreeing with that message, and people go, cool, that's a company I want to support. Or you'll have so many people disagreeing with it that suddenly they're sharing it, going, look at this. But either way, you win because your message gets out there. Either way, someone's sharing that post. You get more website views, more clicks, more people buying, or you're just getting the noise, in which case you become top of the search rates anyway. It's a win-win game when you play it that way. But again, you look at, okay, let's go overseas and see what's happening. Why can't we get away with that message? It's because of the culture, because of the political powers, in which case the protests that happen over here really make sense when things like that happening over there. Not anymore, does it?
Do you think it even works? Like, I'll give you an example, right? If I go on Uber and there's a rainbow flag car, I go, oh, it's a rainbow flag car, and I ignore it. Or I don't even notice it. Like the one I always talk about, we spoke about this before, is the black squares after Black Lives Matter movement, right? Great cause. But I was like, when I went on, everyone had black squares. I was like, is Instagram broken? Yeah. I didn't immediately associate with a story I had not heard at this time. It didn't make me go out and so something must have happened to somebody. So I was like, well, why don't you share support? Why don't you share organizations that will help? Why don't you send your message? Like, you didn't do any of that. You just jumped on a black square on Instagram, which tells me very, very little. It just shows you willing to follow. I made a point of sharing everything. Yeah, it just shows you following the herd as well. I know some people that would have done it that really feel like they're kind of helping the cause, or they're showing what they actually believe, but most people have done it because they saw someone else do it first. And they're like, okay, I want to do that as well. When really there's so many other different ways you can support it. How many people would have gone back later down the line and deleted it because it messed up of how their grid looked as well? A lot of people. So I get it, but it's take the rainbow out of the equation. It is just flag waving. You're just joining the mob mentality because you don't want to be the outlier, because it's scary being the outlier. No one wants to be the one on their own, shouting into the wind when everyone else is shouting back at you. You want to be part of the tribe mentality. You want to be part of the mob. The scary thing now, though, is that we are starting to see in the West, which certainly shouldn't be the case, that the opinions of the people that complain online or the people that fly against the face of it are now actually getting legal repercussions from these things. The couple of examples I mentioned was Tom. I'm not sure he started, so I don't want to slam Tom Bellamy, but he at least shared, if not did it himself, the pride flags in a swastika logo to be anti-gay, but just to be like an anti-virtue thing, right? There was a man that shared it in Bristol or Gloucester or somewhere, right? We shared the post. He didn't post it himself, and he got the police at his door because someone got offended. Yeah. This is scary. And the other one is Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. Should they have queued for the Queen? Yes. Yeah. Yes, they should have done, right? But how has it got anything to do with their job? No, exactly. That's what scares me. The call for them to be banned straight away is, come on, mate, you've got bigger things to worry about, surely, in your own life. That's just terrible. I think they'll go. Say again? I think they'll go. I've heard rumours that they're going. It's so stupid, though, right? But it's only going to make them bigger. Whatever they go to next, you'll have the people that support them. It's only going to make them bigger. So if you want to get them fired for that, Jesus Christ, I'm sure there's presenters and doing a lot worse that we need to look a little bit deeper at, but we can't say any names because we'll definitely get sued. 3-4 years ago, Philip Schofield came out as gay and he was a national hero. Yeah. And now he didn't get in a queue. The other thing that I remember is there was a guy, I saw a story, as a guy where he moved to New York City, and he took videos put them on Twitter of him walking around Pride. And he was just surprised at how he didn't know it was Pride. He was just surprised how many gay people were on the street. And he was like, he wasn't offensive. He was getting involved, giving people hugs. He looked like he was having the time of his life. But someone thought he was being homophobic. And there were a group of people that went, found where he worked, sent an overwhelming amount of tweets to his boss, and he got sacked. He got sacked for attending Pride. Hey, this was huge. And what do you think about these things? This was such a big thing from that 2016 onwards. The tide seemed to turn as soon as Trump got in office. People lost their fucking marbles. You would see this all over the place, especially on Twitter. People think this didn't happen much, but it depends where you hang out, where you see what's happening or not. On Twitter, it was a huge thing. You said a certain thing or shared a tweet or thought a certain way. People were hounding you down, messaging bosses, emailing local communities,
all these things trying to get you exiled or whatever, which was never going to work really. But every now and then, just playing the numbers game, some people got it bad, some people it happened to. Like, what does that actually achieve? What do you think you've done there? How does that improve your life, really? By hounding people and doxing them, and I don't get it.
Does it get to a point where what you did is worse than what they did? If someone put up I don't want to put the pride flag up, and they get fired, I would argue you choosing what to post on your Instagram that wasn't particularly offensive, you just didn't want to post something. Yeah. Having an opinion is worse than you affecting their livelihood, maybe not to be able to afford for their children or pay their rent or pay their mortgage, that you directly affects someone's life, something that didn't directly affect yours. Don't follow them on Twitter.
And some people think that by doing that it makes them some sort of hero, because everyone wants to be a hero. Some people will run into the burning building and save the kid, the cat, the dog. Some people think they're being a hero by getting someone's email address published so you can protest outside their house. Cool. So you're going to make a movie about you, bruv. You've done well there. Really good.
Speaking of movies, what do you think what's your view on Olivia Wilde?
So I didn't know much about this. All I know about it is obviously the recent stuff with Jordan Peterson. I think to claim that you're making any sort of movie character based on him in a negative frame means you've never really listened to the message. You've never understood. You're just trying to get noise. I thought at first that she was just bullshitting. She was trying to get noise about the film. I don't know if I'm not going to see that film either. I'm not going to watch it either. But I don't think necessarily to call Jordan Peterson, of all people, the king of the incels, is the complete opposite of his message. He's telling guys the complete opposite. Do not remove yourself from the sexual marketplace. Do not isolate yourself. Do not become a basement dwelling troll. He's trying to empower guys to do the complete opposite. So how can he be the king of the incels? It makes zero sense. Shows that you've not really listened to his message. He calls her out quite nicely on this interview with Piers Morgan as well. His own podcast. He calls her out quite nicely. But I like how he's not biting to this message too much either. It's just cool. That's why I'm the king of the incels. Cool. Sounds good.
I like how he went. He liked the fact that it was a good-looking actor playing the part.
Yeah.
And he would hope he'd get his fashion sense.
It's so cool, and he calls out perfectly. So like Olivia Wilde, calling the king of the incels, who just so happens to have married a multi-millionaire prince. I didn't know about anything like that. Like I said, I don't really know who she was.
Isn't she just going through a divorce with the guy who plays Fred Lasso?
Let's have a lookie. Let's have a look. I've got. I'm going to become the Jamie.
We're getting data.
I'm going to become Jamie for this podcast.
Google live on air.
But the wife I can name.
Because there was a thing recently. This sounds like a very top relationship. There was a thing recently where she was on stage promoting this movie before the Jordan Peterson thing came out, and there was like divorce papers that her ex-husband literally delivered to her while she was on stage. She thought it was like some sort of positive thing from the event, and they literally just put him on stage. She picked it up, not knowing what it was, opened it, and realised it was like something about her divorce or a lawsuit or something like that, which I really feel sorry for. That's horrendous.
That's really bad. Yeah, presented during Comic-Con 2022, even though a relationship ended in 2020. How bad is that? So originally, I'm not sure what he says on this thing about her marrying a prince, but I don't know. I can't see anything about that. However, I'm on Wikipedia.
I thought she was Harry Styles.
I'm on Wikipedia, which is obviously not the most relevant or reliable source of information. I learned something very interesting about them the other day as well. They're
type Olivia Wilde. What's she doing? Type Olivia Wilde and who did I just say? Harry Styles. I think she's dating Harry Styles now after her marriage ended. If I remember correctly, he's in the movie.
Okay. Their romance is still going strong? But apparently they're not in a rush to take the next step. Well, I should hope not. They've been together, a couple of months? What is the next step?
And she told us to be his mum.
There you go. I'm not sure what you meant about the Prince bit then. I'll have to re-listen to that and double check. So anyone who is listening, don't quote me that Jordan Peterson said Olivia Wilde married a prince or that she has married a prince. Let's do our own research, people, first, you know.
On the whole, and I will go back and say more of this, I'm as much a fan of Jordan Peterson as you. We're talking about people, we talk about the Andrew Tate interview of trying to maybe come across a little bit different and maybe not quite being who he was. And there's one thing about Jordan Peterson I'm going to play devil's advocate where I think is a bit fake. Do you think he overuses the cry? Because I can't remember the last interview where he didn't cry, and it now seems a bit fake.
Thinking this the other day, it comes out of nowhere, right? It really comes out of nowhere, and it's quite regular now. But again, we see the clips of him crying on the regular because it's a thing that can go viral. It's a thing people push. But I think we also have to remember that when Piers said to him, that gets you quite emotional, don't it? You've got to think of the guys that he's worked with, the things he's seen, the stories he knows, the people he meets at the end of his shows that come up and tell him what they've been struggling with, the letters he gets, the things he gets in his forum. He sees the darkest, the absolute darkest side of humanity, especially in the male forum. So I can understand that it's going to affect you. Of course it's going to affect you. Like most therapists and psychologists have to have their own therapist and psychologist to check in with anyway, because this stuff feeds away at you. You can't just listen to these stories and just brush it off. You can't do that. You have to be a full-on psychopath to be able to do that, and he's definitely not. So I get it. I think, obviously, since his own, what would you call it? I don't want to say crisis, but since his own health issues recently that very nearly took his life, I think it hits him even harder now because he's seen and he can come out of this and he still sees guys that can't come out of it. And he still sees guys being pushed down. He still has to answer these stupid questions about do we need men and stuff like that. It's going to get to you. So I don't know if I'd say it's fake, but it also, should it happen that often? I don't know. I think that maybe that shows a little lack of emotional control with that subject because it's such a harrowing subject, maybe.
One of the things he talks about quite often is disagreeableness. And it's something that's almost steered away from in schools as a society. And we're taught to be more agreeable, right? Do as you're told. Yeah. Do you think that's wrong? And do you think this is going to be a positive thing in the world? And how far is too far?
So I'm going to reference someone even better here. Again, shout out every single episode. I'm going to talk about my man, Craig Gillespie. This is a guy, when I first joined Paul Mort's Unstoppable program on our Mansformation Day, he was sat next to me. And then we both joined Alliance, and he turned out to be in my accountability group. And now I consider him a great friend. He's an amazing graphic designer. He spoke on stage the same day I did. We voted for him. His talk was about not abandoning your 8-year-old creativity. And he gave this amazing opening speech about how we're at school up until about the age of 8. We're kind of allowed to just let that creativity flow. And then it gets to a point where they go, right, no, you can't do that. That's unrealistic. You can't draw that. That's outside of the lines. Houses you can't draw a house with a slide coming out of it. That doesn't happen in real life. And suddenly you're stifled into this box. And obviously it's bad for your creativity because you're then pigeonholed and you think there's only one or two ways to think. And you don't see the full spectrum of how you can think and operate and create. And I think this causes a lot more issues in society than we realise. But obviously, he's coming at it from a design perspective, but that message really, really hit that we do. There comes a certain age, especially in school age, where we think academically rather than creatively. And I think this is where a lot of traits are formed, a lot of personality traits are formed. And in terms of disagreeableness, I think we need more of it. I honestly think we need a bit more of it because otherwise you just toe the line and you don't look deeper and you just become, again, it's that mob mentality. Mob mentality, we're agreeable people because you've joined the tribe, you're joining the same message. You might be disagreeing with what the mob is fighting against, but that's not disagreeableness in itself. At that moment in time, if you're part of the groupthink, then you're agreeable. You're not disagreeable at all. And I think we need more disagreeable people because that's what creates discourse. That's what creates us looking a little bit deeper into the reasons behind certain things. But obviously there's different dimensions to disagreeableness. There's hostility, there's abusiveness, there's manipulation, there's a teeny bit of narcissism in there as well, and selfishness. But obviously that's the same with any personality trait. There's spectrums to it. And we can't just say, right, we need to get rid of this trait overall when there is a spectrum to it. Every trait you can identify in someone else, you identify that because you have it yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what that trait looks like. But there's a spectrum. You might not be high on that disagreeable spectrum. You might be very, very low, and vice versa. So it's the same with deplatforming. I don't think we should try and say we need more or less of certain traits. unless we go back to the masculinity traits, in which case we certainly need more. But it's such a tough thing to say we need less of this when it's something that can be bred from such an early age by a system. So if you want less disagreeable people, then we need to watch how we're breeding those people very, very early on, in which case the whole system needs to change.
If we could try for it.
That's how I see it.
Do you think disagreeableness needs to be directed? So, like, I give an example, right? Obviously, with my partner being a teacher, I see the kids in the UK that potentially are a little bit more respectful to their parents. Not all of them, but they are. If we come over here to Hong Kong, you've got the kids on the whole are very agreeable to authority. They do as they're told.
Sure.
But when they leave school and they go and have the helpers, they're smacking them, they're dropping the bags on the floor, walking off. They're disagreeable to people on a lesser scale. Yeah. So do you think the issue isn't disagreeableness, it's directing that disagreeableness in the right way, to be able to stand up for yourself, have self-confidence, as opposed to just being argumentative for the sake of argument?
100% where you direct that disagreeableness. And I believe, don't 100% quote me on this, but I believe that the disagreeable people behind disagreeable traits end up being more successful in their fields, in their chosen fields. And the agreeable people, less so. I don't know the exact reason behind that. I'm going to assume agreeable people are more happy to just let things slide and just to be okay with what they're doing, whereas the disagreeable people are more likely to be competitive, shall we say. That's how I take it, but don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert in the slightest on this.
You would also think as well that it would be that people who are more disagreeable will negotiate pay rises, will negotiate their propositions, whereas agreeable people might take what they can get. Yeah. This is the argument where people talk about the gender pay gap, right? Yeah. That there is a gender pay gap which is looked on averages. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say that there isn't things that need to be worked on in gender equality in work. I think promotions, maybe, if we put aside this slight negotiation thing, that maybe there's boys' clubs that promote people. Yeah. But on the whole, like for like, people are paid the same hourly rate. It's illegal to do not do that. When you're looking at averages and data, as we know, as a big Jordan Peterson thing, women do things for people and men do things for things, which means men tend to pick higher paid jobs than women. But when they try to push that in European countries where they try to get more women into engineering, it doesn't really tend to work. And you also find maternity leave is also a big one because that brings down someone's average pay quite considerably, and they get more of that than maternity leave. But the argument I always get when I bring these facts up is like, what about sport and what about Hollywood? Now, sport, in my opinion, is like, well, if you're going to have, if women's sport brings in more money to create more advertising, create a bigger pot, there's more salaries. Now, you can argue, well, there should be more people watching women's sport. But how many women do you know that go and watch women's sport? How many do you know women buy a ticket to watch women's football? More now, especially in England, right? And deservedly so, because they are amazing, the Lionesses. But this is the difference. Men like sport more, they buy more tickets, there's more money for men's sports, ergo higher salaries. And then the argument of Hollywood is men negotiate more ruthlessly. They don't accept low taking parts. It's changing. There are more women now pushing for higher parts, but in general, and I'm generalising, so I know there's going to be women watch this are more disagreeable, that fight for everything, and brilliant, well done. But on average, they are more agreeable, which means that they might not actually get what they need to. And I know from my past history of work, being a bloke, being maybe more agreeable than I sometimes like to be, there are things and liberties that I've not gotten because I never asked for them. And that's the difference.
Yeah, that's so relevant. That's so relevant. We just look at this average data and go, oh my God, women are paid more than men. But unless you look a lot deeper, and I wouldn't say it's not real, but it's flawed. That pay gap model is inherently flawed. Because if you look at, I believe it's women aged 21 to 29, they're paid a lot higher than men. So in which case, how is there a pay gap? But again, where those agreeable and disagreeable traits come in, maybe later towards the end of those 20s, they're not pushing for the pay rise, they're not negotiating, they're not trying to get what they want, and the disagreeable men are, which is why they then rise further in the ranks in their 30s and 40s, it kind of makes sense. But again, I'm not an expert on that. But it definitely makes sense. It's not just as simple as someone sat there going, right, we're going to pay men more, we're going to pay women less. It's not, as much as we'd love to think that there's some old white man sat in an office somewhere going, right, this is how we're going to ruin the world. Women will pay this, men this much. But it doesn't happen like that. And again, when you take the averages, it's so difficult because what is an average person? it's impossible to really pick that out of the crowd.
If you look at averages, you compare us as personal trainers to stockbrokers.
Yeah.
And then you would say that you can make an argument why aren't personal trainers pay more? Well, because stockbrokers have higher salaries to deal with money. You know, it's those things. And do you think it's more sexist or more racist to hire someone based off a quota? Because I think that is the modern day equivalent of a pat on the bum or a sweetheart. It's like, don't worry, we need one.
Yeah. That's
same as Hollywood.
Exactly it. That's exactly what it becomes. When you're then, and we saw this again from 2016 onwards, where people lost their minds. Suddenly, we're seeing diversity coordinators for the NHS and things like that. If I'm going to a hospital, I want the best person to be dealing with me, and I want someone there because of a diversity quota. I want to know that they're the best at the fucking job, regardless of skin color, ethnicity, gender. Don't care. Just treat me. Yeah, let's get the job done. Same for if anyone I knew that was going in as well. But you see this all over the place. I believe we saw it in the fire service as well. Who cares? Like, who actually has the time to sit down and get mad about this stuff, let alone employ and pay someone to actively seek these things out, which I think is a problematic role, because you're then automatically discarding one large percentage of the population just based on their gender, their colour of skin, whatever the hell it is. If it's a single straight white male you want to drive out of the application pool, that in itself is problematic. Because then you're only, rather than looking at someone's merits, you're looking at someone's skin colour and gender, etc. And that goes against everything I disagree with. But then that then means you're kind of watering down the pool of applicants, really, because you're just looking at one particular thing and then going, right, now let's see what their merits are. That should be the first thing you look at. In fact, the other thing shouldn't even come into question, really. Shouldn't appear on any application form as such. But yeah, it does.
Do you think feminism has gone too far?
I think it's forgotten its original purpose, its original aim, and has now just been hijacked by too many different factions that each have their own agenda. So has it gone too far? Well, you could say in some way it hasn't gone far enough, but in terms of what it originally set out to do, it's lost its message and it's not pursuing that anymore.
I think there's this, so it's a complicated topic, right? There's so many things to unpack in this in terms of whether it has gone too far or not. I saw a starting statistic that obviously people fought, and this is the thing about losing its original message. People fought to get more women in education, more women in schools, more women to vote. Brilliant things. All very should have happened. Shouldn't have even been an issue. But now that actually the trends of boys in schools for higher education, it's flipped. So the problem is actually worse than it was back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but the other way around. And I suppose you could argue this is the other thing: are men doing different stuff? Are they not going to college? Are they getting other careers? But that's such a big, broad thing, and I don't want to go on averages. Yeah. But there's potentially something in that which makes you think, okay, when does it stop? When is it equal? Because if your goal is equality, some of this stuff isn't equal.
That's the thing. You can try and make it as balanced as you can. But the world's too big. People are too different to make that work. You can try and steer things towards one particular demographic, but then you obviously cut out others, in which case that creates imbalance. So you can then steer it back, but you're never going to get it right. The world's too big. Even local communities, you can't do that in. In fact, I think when you look at local community, that's where you see it less, because people are more focused on the individual, how they fit into the community, how they work with it, how they benefit the community. It's when you make things too large scale, that's when you lose that original message. So it's, again, has it gone too far? It's not doing what it's almost like a lost cause, I would say. And it's these radical factions that are now going too far, because they're the ones that want to be heard. They're the ones that want their voice, their message on top, even if they're never going to get what they actually want to. It now seems like it's factions going, well, I'm going to shout about this now, and I'm going to shout about this now instead. And you've now got, God, I really don't want to get us deplatformed, but now you've got feminism and trans rights doing battle with each other as well. You're like, God, you can't, you're not going to win. There is no win in this. There's just more chaos and more division. So unless your goal is to divide even more and get people more angry, hating each other, more argumentative, and more divided, you're certainly going about that the right way. But that's not going to help your cause. It's not going to help your cause. And some people, I don't think they know what their cause is, really.
Exactly. And win's an interesting term, right? Because when you look at this thing of win, if you had a client, right, who was started at 100 kilos and they got to 85 kilos and they were disheartened because they haven't got abs yet, you would say, hey, dude, look how far you've come. You've dropped 25 kilos. This is 15 kilos. That's amazing. And I think we get this. Like, when you see things like, generally, and I'm not saying overall, that we are very close, if not equal, in the West, right? Now, there are places in the world that are very much not the case, and that is horrendous, and we need more time, we need support, we need more done about that. But you often find that the argument goes to these places, but they're still fighting about things in the West. And I'm just like, you've neglected the fact you've done, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't fight for more, but like the difference in the last 50 years is unbelievable. And if you just keep going like that fat loss goal, whatever real discrepancies here, and when we looked about the gender pay gap and how flawed it is, real discrepancies, real issues, that actually they will, I don't want to say sort themselves out, but what you're doing without the aggression will sort that out.
It's interesting.
There was
what you said there. You linked it perfectly into the fat loss realm, perfectly. Because the big thing is everyone's looking for equality of outcome, and you can't. It's never going to work. Equality of opportunity is the only thing we can really create some balance in. Make sure everyone's got that equal opportunity to pursue, but you cannot fix the outcome. And it'd be the same as that, like the geezer that loses 15 kilos, looks phenomenal. May not have abs at the end of it, but looks phenomenal. So in terms of when you take a client on, so I'm getting my words jumbled, but I've got a guy that's lost over 30 kilos now. Phenomenal amount of weight to lose. Life-changing amount of weight to lose. But the abs aren't there. Of course, he's not got a history of training. He's not got a massive history of working with weights or even strengthening the abs up or even knowing how to contract them. But he's lost 30 kilos, life-changing amount of weight. Now, you could look at that and go, right, I could then do a program saying, right, here you go, jump on my program, you're going to lose 30 kilos. Some people will look phenomenal at the end of that, abs, rippling, veins, all sorts of stuff. Some people will look like this guy does, phenomenal, looks absolutely healthy, doesn't look emaciated or anything like that. But again, the abs still aren't there. So I could never say, right, jump on my program, you're going to lose 30 kilos and have abs. This is the message the fitness industry needs to stop. You're going to do this for 6 weeks and you're going to get this result. Because everyone's different. Everyone is so different. Some people will need a different approach. Some people will need a lot longer. Some people will do it in a lot shorter. We can only fix the opportunity. Here's what you need to do. Here's how you fix your sleep. Here's the calories you personally will be on. Here's how you as an individual are going to train. But you can't fix the outcome. You are definitely going to get abs. You can't say that. And it links back to, okay, so we can fix the opportunity. Here's how everyone can have the best starting chance. Which again, maybe that balance isn't there. Maybe that equality isn't there. But you can't fix the outcome. Because someone else has to miss out for that outcome to be fixed. In which case it's more imbalance, more division, more hatred, more chaos. That's what we're seeing.
I want to bring this back to a quote. I want to get your take on a quote. It was also on a Piers Morgan interview with Avery Santana, a common feminist, on Piers Morgan, who said, and I quote, "Men should be terrified of women." What's your this statement?
I agree. We should be. They're terrifying creatures. Terrifying creatures. No, terrified is obviously the wrong word because there shouldn't be any fear. And what I think we're seeing this too much with guys now. They're putting themselves out in that market because of fear. Because they're too scared to go and talk to someone because they've put them up on this pedestal that no one needs to be on. No one needs to be on.
Or they'll get knocked back really badly because now every man's aggressive.
Nothing's going to hurt you more than a woman, probably. Rejection hurts, yeah? Massively so. I mean, yeah, obviously fellas as well, of course. Rejection massively, massively hurts.
Just to throw devil's advocate on this, though, because I know what's going to be said, is that you get over rejection. You don't necessarily get over an attack.
I would argue that and say some don't. I would say some hold that rejection for most of their lives, which is why they'll take themselves out of the market. Because they don't want to face that again. I'd say it goes both ways. Attacks and rejection could be just as painful. But again, that rejection doesn't just have to have come from a female. That could be in terms of the workplace, in terms of audience, all sorts. It doesn't have to just be that singular. But in terms of terrifying, we need to change that. We need to change that message, because again, it's the old school "I am woman, hear me roar, I'm this amazing goddess creature" type thing. Some of you are, some of you aren't. Some of you are kind of lazy. Some of you don't look after yourself. Some of you have no terrifying traits about you whatsoever. So it's not something as a demographic to be feared. No one should be feared anyway, you know? It's a weird quote to say that we should be terrified by him. I don't quite understand the motive behind it.
Yeah, the scary thing is, I think this. I'm not saying this is necessarily a problem now, and I'm not saying the majority of women think this way whatsoever. But I do think this rhetoric is starting to get louder. That the problem is, hence the hashtag "not all men," right? That every man is now a problem. When it is, get me wrong, a minority of men, and a horrendous minority of men. I'm not justifying them in any sense. I don't include them in the same category as me and you, right? But I think there's this dangerous thing here where we start to blame, generalized blame, as opposed to like actually going, hey, look, there are some horrendous people out there. We need the good men in the world, which is most of them, to support us. I think you get way more men on board rather than this backlash. I remember recently there was a lesbian couple who had a surrogate, and they told the doctor they wanted a girl, and then they sued the hospital when it became a boy. But where is this rhetoric coming from? What is that boy going to grow up to think? He's going to think he's lesser. He's going to think he's trash. He's going to think he doesn't deserve to. He's going to think he's dangerous.
Where is this?
And does that potentially, would that make him more dangerous? Because that has trauma in his childhood.
What you're going, so again, trauma. That we think of trauma as you have to have gone through a traumatic experience, but it's not. It's negative experiences, no matter how small, that can build up on top of each other. If no one's watched it yet, I beg you to go and watch. I don't think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, right, because I'm from Essex. It's Gabor. It's either Mate or Mate.
Gabor, it's Gabor Mate.
Mate, isn't it?
I think it's Gabor Mate. I think it's Mate.
It's Gabor, but I didn't know it was his last name. It's Mate. So his latest podcast on Joe Rogan, I think, was one of the most important messages for most people to go and listen to. It was the kindest, most empathetic, important conversation I've heard in a long time since the original Jordan Peterson podcast. It was phenomenal. And he really, really goes, he's a trauma expert. He goes into how these small things can build up again and again and again till you've got this massive, massive ball of trauma, so to speak, internally stored, which affects how you see the world, how you interact, what personality traits come to the forefront, and what personality traits are hidden, never to be seen again until you work on it and fix the issue. So I think some people are too quick to label, I'm doing this because of my trauma. You can still overcome what you've previously been through. Of course you can, but it takes a hell of a lot of work and a hell of a lot of empathy, a hell of a lot of direction and help. But at the same time, we need to recognise that what you've been through is valid. It is valid. Of course it is, especially if it was a full-on traumatic experience. In which case, do you want that to own you for the rest of your life? You've still got work to do if you want to take ownership. Adam Lane Smith, he's a phenomenal guy. He's been on Twitter for years. His Twitter handle is Brometheus. Phenomenal therapist / psychologist. Again, deals in attachment, deals in trauma. Incredible guy. And if you've ever listened to him on his first appearance on Modern Wisdom, he goes into how he deals is the wrong word, how he treats victims of rape. And it was the most empowering... what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I won't try to be clever, but I found it such a amazing way to empower victims, because that's what they are, victims, more than any other way I've ever heard before. How many people hold their hand up and go, I've been so-and-so, and that's going to stick with them for the rest of their life, and that's it. And they take on that victim mentality, and they want people to pander to them because of what they've been through. But the way he explains it, and I think you should all go listen to that. If you're interested in it at all, go listen to that, because it's such an empowering way of looking at it that I think it really will help someone overcome what they've been through. And they've still got that trauma in their past, but it's not a crutch. It's not a hurdle for them to get over anymore. And they can move on to have relationships again, go out in public, be naked in front of another person again, all these different things that someone else might not be able to do. But then we also have to recognise there's a very small demographic that may have happened to or may not have happened to, and they act like it's like they're the most oppressed, beaten person ever, and we should fix it. We should direct the world toward their needs and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing, like when you're going back to the Andrew Tate interview, when he talked about he didn't feel that depression existed. Now, yes, we know that he is wrong with this, but it doesn't change the fact that you think he was saying, Piers Morgan was arguing that mentality is dangerous. And you could potentially make that, but I don't think there's anything dangerous about the message he said. It doesn't make him not wrong about that statement. But the fact that people have this ownership to start to look after themselves and get in that positions. And the problem with we can call it with mental health issues, we can potentially call it with these things, these people have had these horrendous things happen to them. You're never going to get out of those things by resigning and sitting back and not getting out of bed. And I appreciate that I've never had anything like this, you know, that unless it's been completely hidden by my brain and I don't remember it, but to reference. And I don't want to take away from anyone's struggles. But like every person watching this has probably been through a breakup, right? And they probably, if it was a bad breakup, they probably wallowed for a while, right? And that never helped them. The thing that helped them was starting to pick themselves up, work on themselves, improve themselves. And this is obviously a much bigger thing than a breakup, obviously. But having that just someone that empowers you is so important. There's a YouTube channel I just stumbled on recently called Just Pearly Things. I don't know if you know it. But it's linked to Jordan Peterson and things like this. It's because I went down the Jordan Peterson wormhole. It's the suggestion. Right. And it's a men's rights activist. Okay. And her podcasts are really good because they just get people, they get feminists on, they get guys on, they get girls on, they get all those things. They just have a conversation. And I think she's very well spoken and she has the ability to say some of the points that we might get slammed down with because of our gender. Okay. She has that ability to speak this message. But I don't know what you think of this. I don't know if I agree. I don't know if she's lost me here. One thing she says is that women feel entitled to safety. And what she meant by this is that her very much argument is that she wouldn't put herself in a position where she can get hurt. There's a guy on that show that said he has a gold chain, an expensive gold chain. Now, should I be able to walk down a dark alleyway at night with my gold chain on? Absolutely should I. But am I going to? No. Because the argument is like, we just don't live in a fair world. And trying to say that the world is fair and that you have, again, it's working on outcomes. Like you said earlier on, it's fighting for outcomes rather than fighting for what is giving perspective of what is reality. I don't necessarily think I agree with that, but I want to hear your take on that.
It's a tricky one, right? It's a very tricky one. Because, again, you could say, right, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where there's danger, right? But how do you know? How do you know? You could say, right, in that case, I'll never leave the house because there's danger everywhere you fucking turn. And you've no idea what's going through someone else's head. And again, this nicely comes back to what I was saying about the Adam Lane Smith interview, where one of the things where he's counselling rape victims is it wasn't about you. It's nothing about what you did. It's not how you were dressed, how you were acting, or anything about that apart from you were the person in that place at that time. The person who did it was going to do it. It just so happened to be you. So it takes the fault away from that person, not to make them feel better, because it's true. Because it's true. That person who did it was not necessarily singling out you for how you dressed, how you were acting, how you spoke or whatever. It's because that's what they were going to do. That's that person, unfortunately. So same as mate you pulling up on a moped with a knife and wants to take your iPhone. It's not necessarily you. It's what they want. It's that iPhone that they want. So you could try and look at it and go, right, okay, now I'm going to never put myself in a position where there's danger, which means you're not going to live. And I'm going to make sure I'm not putting myself in a position which will ever be perceived as dangerous to another person. Well, again, how can you... We haven't got the brain capacity to be this spatially aware in such a overpopulated... I don't want to say overpopulated, but in such a largely populated world. In London. How can I walk around London at night? I was having this conversation with a very good friend of ours not so long ago, where he was walking at night down, and he's a large bodybuilder type guy. He wears hoods. He's got a big old beard on him, giant bag. In the dark, that would look like quite an imposing figure. And he's walking behind a female in these dark streets, and it suddenly occurs to him, how is this being perceived? If she turns around and sees me, Is she going to be scared? Is she going to run? Should I cross the road? If I cross the road, does it look like I'm trying to make it not look like that's what's going to happen? And suddenly you're like, Jesus Christ, he's just walking down the road to go home. Like, how can you can't constantly live your life based on what you think other people might be thinking about you at that particular time. You can't base your life based on what other people definitely are thinking about you. You've just got to do the best you can.
Yes.
Obviously, you don't know what that other person's thinking. She might turn around, have a rape whistle, blow that rape whistle. She might turn around with a weapon and go, yeah. She might be the attacker. You have no idea what's going on. She might just be a normal person that wants to get home as well and is used to people walking behind her. How can you possibly ever know what is the right thing to do? It takes so much attention and energy and brain span that you won't have energy to do anything else. And this is what these incels are doing. They'll just hide away in the mum's basement because it's a safe place. They can get their wins through video games. They can get their sexual satisfaction through porn, although most of them don't, from what I'm reading. Apparently it's quite a pornless society, but I could be wrong. So how do you know what is the right thing to do? How do you know if you're being perceived as putting someone else in danger? Yeah. Or how do you ever know? I think that's the thing.
I think like everything, the answer's in the middle, right? And on the whole, I think I very much agree with you. I think living in a world where you have to think, and if you're in a world where you immediately assume the worst in anybody, that's not a very nice existence. Now, will that keep you safe one day? Maybe.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, there's that thing of like, okay, but I'm now spending the rest of my life in fear when nothing might ever happen. Yeah. And you're creating that unnecessary stress on yourself. And do you put yourself at more risk by not being like that? Yeah. Maybe, but do you think you put yourself at risk doing anything? Yeah. Cross the road, get into a car. And most people, I'd like to think in this world, maybe I'm being over nice, are generally okay and wouldn't do any of these things. And there are things that are wrong with certain people. So I think the answer's in the middle because I generally agree with you. But on the flip side of that, I think everyone should basically be empowered to try to put themselves in the safest possible position they can be. Yeah. That doesn't mean never walking down an alley at night, but just like be smart. Because if your response is immediately going to be, woe is me, or I'm a victim, whether you are or not, I'm not taking anything away from that. You're in this position where you don't take that power and you don't actually put yourselves in a good position. So you become a bit more reckless because that's the problem. I don't know.
Again, and how can you ever know what's around the corner? We can't. Unfortunately, that's one of life's great mysteries. You don't know. You don't know if suddenly that geezer who's driving right in front of you has had too many drinks and is about to swerve and hit you. How can you ever know? Like, that's the whole point of the driving test. It's not to make sure that you're the best driver, but so you can watch so you can learn what other people are doing, how other people drive. And I think that's being a good driver. Not just necessarily being the best yourself, but being aware enough to see what other people are going to do, that you can react to it. Because, again, once you're in the car, you're probably safe. As long as you know how to drive, stay in the lines and follow the speed, you're safe, yeah? It's what other people do that make it dangerous. And that's just the same in society. You don't know who's coming out of the pub that just wants to fight. A good friend of mine died many, many years ago, maybe even, 20 years now. 20 years. And he was just having a whale of a time in a pub, came outside, and this guy attacked him from behind. The guy fell down some stairs, knocked unconscious, went into a coma for a week, and they shut him down about 2 weeks later, maybe less than that. And the guy served minimal amounts of time. It was terrible. What was the guy's motive? Drunk and wanted to fight. They hadn't had any interaction earlier in the night at all until he was leaving. Adam, my friend, didn't say anything to him. There was no interaction. There was no fisticuffs beforehand. Just walked out of the bar. Geezer comes up from behind him, punched to the head. Down the stairs he goes. And that's it. And life was over, just like that. For what? And how was he ever meant to know? Didn't put himself in danger. He hadn't created an argument or a fight beforehand. It's just that's what the guy wanted to do at that moment in time. So how can you avoid that when you don't go out then?
What do you think necessarily the solution is? Because there's the old saying of like, not every man is an attacker, but most attackers are men. I don't necessarily think I believe that. I just think that when men do it, it potentially is more fatal, more disastrous. If a bloke hits a woman, it can be horrendous. If a woman hits a bloke, it's dealt with quite pretty quickly. But with that in mind, with the most dangerous crimes generally, on average, being blokes, what's the solution? Because I know someone came up with a curfew for men. I know that was ridiculed and considered silly, but isn't it scary that someone's got to that point where they think it's a good idea?
God.
The society has put them in a position where they think that potentially could be the solution. Whether you think, listen to this, that's a dumb decision or not, that's your call. I certainly do. But yeah, what is the solution?
The solution is to remember that unfortunately we live in a dark world. It's never going to be sunshine and rainbows and everyone's safe and everyone's happy, holding hands, skipping around meadows and what have you. Unfortunately, it's a dark world. You can look at that in terms of my friend going out for a night out. You can look at the rape statistics of any country. Well, maybe not even Western countries. Look further east. I'm sure they're even worse. You can look at these poor girls that were just backpacking across wherever the hell it was in the Middle East, top of Turkey or wherever it was, that unfortunately got caught and beheaded by 3 ISIS terrorists. And they were just girls backpacking, you know? So you could then say, right,
Jesus.
girls, don't backpack on your own. How can you can't just hide away from life like this, unfortunately. But the best thing you can do is make sure you have a decent community, decent social circle, people that will look after you and that will keep you safe. But what's the solution? To everyone hide away? Look at poor Sarah Everard. What's the solution there? Some people saying she shouldn't be walking across Clapham Common at night on her own. And yes, there is that argument. But let's not forget the guy that stopped her was a policeman, right? I don't know if he was in police uniform at the time. I don't know what the deal was. At that moment in time, you'd think there'd be some sort of safety element. But there obviously wasn't.
I think if I remember correctly, he did stop with his police car, I think. Yeah. Which put her in this position where you think you trust authority, right? Yeah. You think you trust a police officer. And maybe the solution there is, I don't know, because is this the first time he's done something like this? You don't have a background check on these sort of things. And it's a horrendous thing that happens. And every time something like this happens, it's horrendous. You know, and I don't want anyone to get the wrong end of the stick of thinking any of this is me coming out against the best people in the world. I've got someone in there who's the best person in the world to me, right? And if anything like that happened to her, I would do everything to keep her safe.
It's as horrific as it may sound, there has to be a certain level of ownership. There has to be. But at the same time, because you have to recognise that society is dangerous, unfortunately. And the bigger the society is that you're in, the more danger that you're in. We like to think that if you went to a remote community and you just randomly walked out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, some nutter's going to attack you and murder. That's the stuff of horror films. That's Hollywood. That's not actually what's happening. You're probably safer in those smaller communities because everyone knows each other. You can get a chance to build a relationship. If there is a dodgy person, you're probably going to exile them a little bit. But once you're in big cities where there's too many people, you can't possibly know everyone around you, that's where the real danger is coming from. There has to be an element of ownership that you don't stupidly put yourself into a position that you didn't need to have put yourself into. But again, it's how much brain power do you want to devote to questioning every single decision you're about to make in your life, thinking, is something about to happen to me? That's living in fear. And then you're never going to do anything.
Yeah. So to move on to finish off on a slightly more light-hearted topic around this, what do you think about women in Hollywood? Not as should they have big roles, because they 100% should, but to demonstrate my point, and apologies, I will explain this to people that do listen to this in audio format. I'm going to share my screen. So if I open this up. So if you can see this picture, what is your thought on this?
That's hilarious, isn't it? That's hilarious.
So for people that don't know, we are looking at Captain America is now played by what was his character before? The black guy who played I'm not up on my Marvel.
He was Nighthawk,
right? Iron Heart, which is now the replacement as a female Iron Man. We've now got Mighty Thor, which is a female version of Thor. We've got Black Widow, which is
why isn't it Iron Woman? I understand Thor. They've made Thor. Why isn't it Iron Woman? Why is she Iron Heart?
I don't know. Black Widow, which is female, always has been and always been amazing, right? Like don't get me wrong, like that is a strong female character that I can totally relate to.
But she had a terrible solo film. That was terrible, but incredible character.
Miss Marvel, Black Panther, now a woman, She-Hulk, and then Hawkeye, which is now a woman. What's your take on that picture?
It's so dumb because that is pandering to, not even to the masses, that is pandering to a very small minority that want their representation right. But you have to remember, okay, let's look at Iron Man, let's look at Superman, let's look at Spider-Man, let's look at Batman. These things existed because those comics inspired, catered to, and were gobbled up by a very young male audience, because that male audience wanted to be action heroes. We wanted to be Batman. We wanted to fly like Superman. We wanted to fire arrows like Hawkeye. Those traits appealed to us as a young kid, same as wrestlers and things like that as well. If you look at females, didn't really go for that. They didn't. There just was these two different pathways as a kid, and you could say yes, that's what was being pushed. But in terms of, you look at when these comics first came out, there wasn't this massive media control like there is now. So there was less of a narrative to push them. They were just providing entertaining comics that boys happen to love. So let's do more and more and more of them. You could say that's different now. You could say with this media control that we have, and they're trying to push this female message, that is an agenda and a narrative behind that. I don't think you're ever going to force female action heroes onto the mass population, because I don't think the majority of females give a shit. I think that's it. Forget that you're trying to say, right, boys should be watching women's football and boys should be looking at Iron Hearts and She-Hulk and things like that. You've got to get the females behind it, really. I don't think the females care, really.
But there's this argument that happens that, like, it's toxic masculinity to be supportive of male characters. It's like men can't stand behind a woman character. Is it? Because I think men, like women, want to look up to someone, aspire to someone that they share traits within themselves. Yeah. I want to be Batman, I want to be Superman. I never want to be Batgirl. I can't relate to this. And if we look at wrestling, it's a great example. I wanted to be Triple H, right? Now, there are exceptions, but I guarantee if you went, maybe because Vince was such a sexist pig, that he didn't, that maybe this isn't the case. Maybe there are women that have male favourite wrestlers because they were pushed heavily. But if you looked at women's, in the last 5-10 years, of women wrestling fans, if you asked them who their favourite wrestler were, it'd probably be Charlotte Flair, it'd probably be Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Bayley, and like, no one would say that, oh, what, you're saying you just don't like male wrestlers? No. They aspire to be like these role models that offer that something to them as characters. Yeah. And I think the problem, and when we look at She-Hulk in particular, right, Black Widow is a great exception. Black Widow movies, I generally think, and like, you know, and I gave an example. I had this conversation with Elle, and Lily brought up Black Widow, and I think, okay, Marvel on the whole, I know we slam Marvel at the start of this, do it better. And Black Widow is a great, strong, relatable, awesome female character that is intelligent. But when we look at She-Hulk, it feels like the problem isn't the fact that it's a female lead. The problem is the fact that because you want to force a female lead, the writing suffers. Yeah, it's a woman who's like, I need to hold down a career. I'm better at dealing with my anger than you because I have to deal with it every day. And I'm like, no, in these forced narratives, how many women look at that? And again, I appreciate I'm a bloke, so women listen to this. Let me know what you think. How many women look at that and go, man, I want to be She-Hulk? Because she's not an inspiring character. It's nothing to do with gender. They are written badly. Yeah. And this is the problem. Yeah. Not the gender of the character at all.
100%.
Make a proper, strong female character and women will like them. Make a forced female character and it will tank. And it won't tank because men didn't like it.
Exactly. And it also comes down to making a decent movie. Like, you showed me the She-Hulk trailer. It looks terrible. I'm not going to watch the whole film. Or it was a series, wasn't it? Or was it a film?
I'm not sure. I lose track. But I think it's a series because Daredevil will end up showing up.
So the trailer looked terrible. I'm not going to watch it. The Black Widow film, I'm probably never going to watch it again. I'll watch all the Avenger films that I love, which is not all of them, over and over and over again because they were great stories, great characters, great action. The Black Widow film I just didn't enjoy. So I'm not going to watch it again. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it was Black Widow solo film because I love her in Avengers. But you've got to make a decent film behind it as well. You could look at the first Wonder Woman, phenomenal film. Absolutely love every second of it. You could look at Wonder Woman's role in Batman v Superman and Justice League, the Snyder Cut, not the original Justice League. Phenomenal. But then you look at Wonder Woman 1984 and it's a terrible film. It's a terrible film.
Yeah.
So you could look at the box office statistics and go, oh, guys aren't watching Wonder Woman. We need more Wonder Woman because we need to force guys to watch it. Or you could go, it was a shit film. You should have written it better. That would have brought your box office statistics up, really. But it also shows, we saw this with the Snyder Cut, that when Hollywood executives get their hands on something, you end up with terrible, terrible products. And I think this is what's happened with Marvel and Disney now, is they've gone, we've got this massive thing that the world loved, from the Avengers all the way up to Endgame. Let's do more of it. But that kind of had its moment. You're just flogging cash cows now and trying to add diversity into the mix because it's full of diversity quotas. And you get just ended up with terrible writers, terrible films. That's what people don't want to watch. Doesn't matter if it's a male or a female lead. We want to see a decent film. This is the risk with Bond. We want to see a decent film. And we want to see Bond is the character, which is why it's pointless ever doing a female one. Because it's the Bond traits.
We were, you did perfect. You did your segue for me of talking about James Bond. But before we talk about the possibility of a female James Bond, we spoke about sound bites earlier, particularly with the Andrew Tate thing we spoke about earlier on. And do you think, where has this narrative come that James Bond movies marginalise and objectify women? Because there are exceptions, right? If you watch your favourite Bond movie, you spoke earlier on, and I will see The Island, and I will send you pictures and make you very jealous. Man with the Golden Gun, right? And you look at Miss Goodnight, and they make a dit, they make a done. So there are exceptions. That is not a great written part for a woman. But when I actually stop and look back and go, okay, is there anything in this? I watched this as a kid and gone, just glossed over this as a young boy, right? Like in the films. And we also mentioned the only live twice statement. Horrendous. I'm not going to repeat it. It hasn't aged well. But Ursula Andress, strong female, smart character in the first movie when it wasn't the done thing to do smart, strong female characters. Pussy Galore, Tiffany Case, both women in You Only Live Twice, despite some of the sexism that's in the writing. The women in it are generally very, very strong. Tilly Masterson in Goldfinger. I'm only at Sean Connery, right? We see, I watched Tomorrow Never Dies the other day. And Wei Lin, what a badass. Halle Berry, Natalia, not strong. And this is what the big thing about the writing of females as well, is that the answer isn't always to make them non-believable that they've got to kick a guy's ass that's twice their size, because maybe Wei Lin, but generally most women won't be able to do that. But what they can do is they can be smarter. And there's total data to back up that women on hold are smarter. So, I think Bond were doing strong female characters before strong female characters became a talking point.
100%. 100%. And you could look at who's the biggest female character in Bond's life from first film onwards, Miss Moneypenny. And who gives it back to Bond more than anyone else in the film? Miss Moneypenny. That's a strong female character right there, who was never subdued or ever sexualized or anything like that. She didn't have to be. That shows that you can be a strong female presence throughout this guy's life without ever needing to be sexualized. Okay, there was flirting going on there. That's just conversation. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's just conversation. If you can't handle that, I don't know what to tell you. But I think that's the perfect example of strong female leads. Now, you could argue, right, why do half of them have to be in bikinis and things like that? Well, if you look at when they are, it's showing that the bad guys are the ones doing that. Let's look at Man with the Golden Gun, for example. Britt Eklund suddenly trapped on the island in a bikini. Looking amazing, of course, because she's got an incredible body, because she looks after herself. But Bond didn't put her in a bikini. Scaramanga put her in a bikini because he's trying to subdue and sexualize and show this is her only worth because he's the bad guy, a millionaire with his own island and he's going to take over the world, etc.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows a very, very positive message there, that it's the bad guys that are doing that. It's not the good guys that are ever doing it.
That's really interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I've been thinking this and I wouldn't have thought about this for this episode. But with this route of having no one be offensive, it makes it very hard to write a good evil character because they can't do anything that makes them evil. And it makes good guys hard to write because they can't overcome anything of worth. Racism, sexism, bigotry, things that people taking over the world, taking over races, things like this. These are things that we relate to. If you're not a racist or sexist, these are things you go, oh, I don't like this guy. Yeah. And that's part of the thing when he gets him, yes, I've got him. That's a good villain. And if you look at here's a great example, right, of Bond doing it right, doing it wrong. So if you look at the role of Judi Dench throughout in GoldenEye, she was authoritative, Then she softened, but she was still in charge. She was respected. And it was never forced down our throats. Like, I never went into Goldeneye going, oh, God, they're just forcing this. I thought, awesome, totally on board with this. Because it was just like you would, a woman could rise to the ranks of being the head of the secret MI6 Secret Service, right? Totally legit, totally fair. If we fast forward to No Time to Die, I'm not saying Bond should sleep with every woman, but what I am saying is that have you noticed there was no womanizing in the latest movie?
Yeah.
Not only was, and if there wasn't, that's fine. There are movies where there isn't, right? And that's totally acceptable. Like Quantum, he kisses her, but he doesn't really do much, right? But the thing I have is that they made a point of going, no. Like they were almost repulsed by the idea that Bond, they were making a point. Yeah. In the same way that when they killed that scientist, she could have killed him 10 minutes ago if she wasn't planning on keeping him alive, but she waited until he said something racist to kill him. It's a forced writing that I have an issue with. It wasn't any equality of anything.
Yeah. And there's a way to do it right and a way to do it very, very wrong. And I think one of the greatest ways they got it right, for no other reason than artistic purpose, is in Casino Royale, the scene where Eva Green's seen the guy getting shot and she can't handle it and she's in the shower in her dress. Originally, that was going to be their love scene. Originally. But instead, he gets into the shower with her, fully clothed, sits down, comforts her, and it's an amazing scene. Now, the reason is not because they went, oh, no, we can't have Bond making love to women anymore. They changed it because it was a much more, I think it was Daniel Craig changed it, actually. I could be wrong. It was just a much more powerful, emotive scene that really, really hit hard how this girl had come from this admin role, even though obviously we know where she really was, had come from this admin role and had never been immersed into that part of the world. And suddenly that's a very jarring, traumatic thing to be put through immediately there. I think there was such a much better. I see that scene so differently now since knowing that they changed it from its original intention.
Do you think they ever made her lesser?
Did they make her lesser?
Do you think, like, because a lot of people will say this, right? The fact that she couldn't handle it when Bond could, does that make her lesser? Do you ever go into that going, oh, this woman, they made this woman to not be able to handle it? Because I think Eva Green was so strong.
Incredible, Kat.
In so many ways.
Okay, so let's take everyone currently in their current roles and let's put them in the middle of a war zone and let's see how everyone comes out of it, how everyone handles it. You're not making that character any lesser than how a normal person would handle a traumatic, stressful experience where there is death right in front of you. Most people will go through their life without seeing death unless it's in the coffin. And in which case, you're still not seeing death. You're just seeing people there 1 minute and then gone or very peacefully pass away in hospital. Most people will not see death in a violent, aggressive, fast manner that it can be. Some people think that everyone dies how you do in Hollywood. You get your final last words, you draw your last breath, soundtrack playing. It's not like that in the slightest. It's
one thing. I was just on that note, just on the topic of Bond, which I thought was just Skyfall is my favourite Bond movie of all time.
Skyfall, so underrated.
And when M dies, there's one thing I was like, oh, why have you done this? Why have you done the old cartoon thing? Because I got one thing right. She might as well say the treasure's buried in the. I'm like, oh, why did you do it? Why did you finish a line or not finish any line? Like, oh,
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing with Hollywood.
Yeah,
they don't get death right. They've completely warped people's views of what death actually is and how it actually happens. My God.
It's interesting you say about how any one person would deal with that sort of thing, because like as I said, like the difference between Bond and Vesper in that moment was about Bond having. It's not a man versus woman thing. It's that Bond having experienced it before and become hardened to it, and she is not. If you flip that round and she was the hardened one to it, it would be the same outcome if it was real. Yeah. In the same way that I'm a bloke and I witnessed a hit and run. And I have no idea to this day whether that person survived or not. Although I'd like to think no news is good news in the media, but I can't imagine her surviving it. I was in bits for a very, very long time. So and then that proves the point. It's more accurate of someone who is an accountant seeing death.
Yeah. It doesn't lessen her character at all. It, like you say, it strengthens her, if anything, because of how she then grows from that for the rest of the film. Okay, take the ending out of the equation. but how she grows through the rest of that film, that's inspiring. And that's what everyone should be able to take, is this traumatic experience and build and grow from it to become a better, stronger person. And you can never really come that until you're exposed to this stuff. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to go out and watch people get killed in the slightest. That's going to cause more damage than anything else, trust me. But it kind of showed that's the ideal strong female character. Overcame adversity, overcame trauma, and becomes a very, very integral, major part of how that film ends.
And it's good writing.
It's great writing.
We spoke earlier on about it's great writing. And the character wasn't forced in. There needed to be a Bond girl. That role was there for a woman. She came in, you wrote it well, she acted it well, and it was like, okay, this is how women should be portrayed in cinema, as opposed to forcing something, which I actually think is, again, more sexist, because like, you have our franchise because you can't have your own, and then write it badly, so that it defeats the purpose when women can't relate to them either. Yeah. Do you think there should be a female Bond? Do you think there's going to be? That's a better question, because I know your answer to do you think there should be. Do you think there's going to be?
I don't feel like there is going to be. I don't feel like they are actively looking for a female Bond. I don't think so. I would be amazed if they did. I would put money on them not doing that. And I think they know, I think they're wise enough to know what's at stake. I think the bigger push for there to be a female Bond comes from outside factions, not from the writers in the family. It's not going to come from them. It's noise.
And people have not seen a Bond movie.
People have not seen a Bond movie.
A lot of times people have not seen a Bond movie.
That's it. A lot of the time, this is what it comes from. The noise is from people who aren't even involved. There was a big push years ago, more females in Dungeons and Dragons. Bruv, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons? It's like the women want to play Dungeons and Dragons. No, it comes from outside noise. So I don't think there will be. I really don't think there will be. Because it would be the end of the franchise, because Bond as we know it, the style, the traits, the whole vibe about it, the whole ethos of what James Bond as a character is, can't be replicated in a woman. You'd have to really, really water that character down, which is not what people want to see. They want to go see James Bond. They want to see ludicrous weapons. They want to see crazy stunts. They want to hear one-liners. If you change that, you've changed what the whole vibe of the film is and the character is, in which case you've just killed it. So why should we? It's like, okay, I want to see Superman. I don't want to watch him fly. I want to see him a bit more human. Let's take away his flying power. Okay, that's only going to last until the point where you have to give him that power back. You have to. I want to see Batman, but I don't want him to be Bruce Wayne anymore. I don't want to see the millionaire aspects. You have to have the entire character. You change one part of it, then, like I say, you've killed it. What's the point?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and I don't think they'll do it now. I do think they were. They say they're not considering it. They never considered it. I think they did, and I think they wanted to see the vibe as soon as they did the last movie and how that last movie ended, to see what people. If people said they wanted it, I think they might have done. But obviously that didn't happen, and I think there's more chance of being a Bond of colour, which I'm not as against as I used to be, but it's that thing as like. Again, it's forcing people into roles. Like I always look at this when I look at cinema. I go, if this was the other way around, would it be outrage? Yeah. And if it is, then it shouldn't be done this way around. And like, what was wrong with Shaggy in Scooby Doo? Right? Who do you think? Who do you think would be Bond?
I would love to say it's Cavill, because I love Cavill. And
he's the favourite all of a sudden. I'm so excited.
However, as far as I know, I believe, I haven't seen it and nothing's confirmed, I think the Black Adam shows that he's back in the DC universe. However, the DC universe is screwed. Warner Brothers have completely screwed this up. So you could say, right, Henry Cavill's back in it based on what happens at the end of Black Adam. That doesn't mean he's going to get a ton of Superman films, even though I think he should. But if he's going to be Superman, he'll be too busy to be Bond. And if he's going to be Bond, he'll be too busy to be Superman. So obviously he's going to have to make a choice there. And maybe that choice has already been made, which is maybe why Superman's back in the DCEU. If that is actually the case. I could be so wrong. if he is Bond, I will be the happiest man on the planet because I think he will embody and nail that role. And as long as we have decent writers, we're going to see a good, decent amount of phenomenal Bond films for a while. But we have to recognise, like, look at, okay, Daniel Craig, nearly unknown when he took that on. Pierce Brosnan, not the hugest actor on the planet. And these guys are signing up for something that's going to take them decades. It's going to take decades of their life if they want to do multiple films. And we've got Cavill in, I forget, what's the Sherlock Holmes type one that he's in as well? He's in Witcher.
Enola Holmes.
He's got Witcher on the go as well. He's potentially got Superman. He's got a lot on his plate. So I don't know. But I like the fact if it is him, that we're going to see a slightly older Bond. That's what I want to see, slightly older again. I don't want to see him go straight.
Well, there's a talk of him being younger.
I know.
Yeah, there was talk of being younger, but I still think he's right in terms of age because he's not that much older. He's still late 30s. Yeah. He's not as old as you think he is. So I think he can do 15 years quite easily. He'd be the similar age as Craig, right? Maybe a bit younger. I think he's younger to the role. Yeah. So I think the talk of, like, I even heard Tom Holland been thrown around, which is awful. René Jean Page.
Not for me.
If he's not going to be Cavill, it's Richard Madden, right?
Yeah, makes sense. There's no chance Hardy's getting. There's no chance it'll be Hardy.
He's too old. He is too old.
Yeah, I think it'd be too much of a caricature as well. But I'd have no problem with Madden at all. No problem with Madden. I think that could be good. But
if they're going to have a high-profile character like Cavill, this is the time to do it, because even though Bond has always been one of the most successful movie franchises in history, Daniel Craig did take it up in terms of box office appeal. Sure. So now they might be more willing to invest than they've ever done before, 100%. Especially with how it ended. Yes. And if you want to modernise the character without it becoming watered down, you almost need to take it a bit back to the Brosnan, slight tongue-in-cheek, but still serious at moments approach. If you try and do Daniel Craig but modernised, you get No Time to Die, which is really jarring.
Yeah, it's true. Be interesting. I hope they announce something soon, because it's
60th anniversary. You've got
to do something special. You've got to. You can't leave it. So I'd like to think that maybe they already know. I'm going to quickly interject. I have 20% battery and I'm dying for a pee, but I'm still okay to continue for a few minutes. But I'd like to think that maybe they already know. Maybe they've already found their guy. But it's just one of those things they have to really, really keep secret. Like who's actually won World's Strongest Man come Boxing Day when it was already filmed in September. That sort of level of secrecy, you know?
I think that. I think that. Well, to save your bladder, I think that's a good place to end it there. Thanks again, Rob. Again, I said this last week, but well done the speech. The clips look really, really good. And again, as always, where are people finding you?
Easiest place, just because I'm going to be doubling down on it, is Fat Loss Fastlane or Copy Domination. My personal page, Rob Core, which you'll see me tagged in on the episodes a lot. It's just my personal page. And all I'm going to be doing there is sharing Copy Domination, Fastlane stuff from now on. Anyway, unless I've made it private by the time you get to it, in which case I'm just going to be talking about food and UFOs. But I still do that on other pages anyway. Those are the two places I'd go for. If you want to hear me talk about writing, go to Copy Domination. If you want to hear me talk about fat loss, training, men's health, men's hormones, all that stuff, then Fat Loss Fastlane's the place that's going to be from now on. That's what I do.
Awesome, Rob. Pleasure as always, man. I'll speak to you in 2 weeks. So I'll be seeing the Bond Island next week. Enjoy
the hell out of it. I think we should have covered that more on this episode. But enjoy the hell out of that.
What, me going to Thailand? Yeah. We'll talk about Thailand when I come back. That may be better.
A vlogcast episode. Solo.
We're just chitting with me sitting by the pool.
You on the Bond Island, that could be something.
Oh, mate, I might do that. I might do that. Right, I'll let you save your bladder. But, mate, have a good one. Speak to you in 2 weeks.
See you soon, bro.
So when that goes